Hello and welcome to the Glimmer Gang Podcast. We have a treat of an episode for y'all today, and we all agree it was one of our favorites to record. So without further ado, everyone, take it away. Welcome to episode 5 of the Glimmer Gang Podcast, everyone. We hope you all are doing well. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at what it takes to have a competitive mindset and how you can create a winning game plan. So, first for our competitive mindset. What a competitive mindset is you're going into a tournament and you're trying to win. I think that is the best way to put it. You want to win and you want to do everything you can to win, whether that be testing and playing with people as much as you can outside of tournaments, doing as many deck techs as you can, understanding the cards. Like I know personally when I played Pokemon, I would spend hours sometimes just staring at cards, trying to see what goes well with each other. And I think that is the biggest thing, like knowing what combos well and putting that together into a deck is something that will benefit you in the long run. And I think that is the biggest thing of competitive mindset is to be able to just focus on winning. And I know sometimes it's hard to focus on that and like you get distracted and stuff. And that's happened to me before. But I think the biggest thing is just to like you have to switch it on in your mind a little bit to be able to focus on winning and you are competing instead of being a casual player. Because casual players, we've talked about it before, they're just going there, having fun and enjoying the event. But competitive players, they're going to win. They're going to get the top places. They're going to get the top prizing. And so with talking about that casual to comp, Blake, I know you like coming from somebody who hasn't played many TCGs competitively before. What are your thoughts on that going from casual competitive and changing that mindset?
Yeah, this has been something that I've just been doing a lot of research on ever since getting into the Lorcana community. And it is a huge part of that because I have played a lot of trading card games growing up. It's just I never had that mindset of wanting to win. I just wanted to play. So basically, one of the biggest things I've learned is the time that you are going to invest into the game versus just playing the game. Usually, a casual player will just sit down and play the game. Competitively, you're going to invest a lot more time into learning about the game, trying things out, uh, spending time with friends and at local competitions, investing that time into playing the game to get better and better. But yeah, investing all of that time and just switching that mindset from just wanting to play the game and to winning the game. Um, and that's one of the biggest things I've noticed in my research. Is there anything you guys can pass on to me that you notice from your experiences from going from casual to competitive?
I'm in a pretty similar situation myself where most of my trading card experience has been from a more casual standpoint. I did try to get a little bit more competitive when I was playing My Hero, but going back to what you were saying, like the big differentiator that I noticed and the thing that I lacked when I was playing was that level of preparation. And that's kind of what sets a competitive person apart is the level of preparation that they're going to be doing in order to, as Teddy said, win. Understanding the meta, what decks you're going to face, how your deck can counter them, what rogue decks might pop up, what other crazy combinations you might need to look out for. Like all these different things that you're actively preparing for rather than just playing the game. A casual person could put in just as many hours playing the game as a competitive, but it's how you're preparing and that mindset going into it of what you're looking for, how you're going to deal with it, what your game plan is, and how you're going to execute it that really differentiates it. It kind of harkens back to this thing one of my old bosses would always talk about, and it was that, people talk about people getting lucky all the time, but his saying was always, luck is where preparation and opportunity meet. And so as a competitive player, you're preparing to take whatever opportunities you're given. And that turns into luck.
I'm going to go back on what Spencer's talking about, like old coaches, old bosses. An old baseball coach once said to me, practice doesn't make perfection, it makes permanent. And I think that kind of speaks to this. Like, you can go in, anybody could go in and play in a tournament and enjoy playing the game as a casual player. But putting in that time behind the scenes, I think like something that's always said is like putting the work behind the scenes to show and perform in front of the scenes. And I think that goes for a trading card game too. Like, if you're going to want to win, you got to put in the work behind the scenes. You got to grind it out. You got to spend hours looking at what cards can do and testing things. If you just like go off of YouTube, and the YouTube videos from professionals are helpful, they do help a lot. I know I've used them in the past, but being able to sit down and just say, okay, this card works well with this card. Maybe it does work. It does work well, but maybe I don't like playing like that. But I know it's going to come up in another deck. So how do I counter with this card I like playing? And I think that is the biggest thing, is knowing that you have to put in the work behind the scenes, because if you don't, you're not going to see any results once you go out and play. You may see like few results here and there. You may get lucky, ironically, like Spencer said. You may get lucky that you go and win a tournament, or you go and win a few games and you place high. But if you want to repeatedly place high, it's going to take that extra hour and that extra effort spent learning the game and actually understanding how the game works, which I think is the biggest thing when changing from casual competitive, is being able to shift that mindset to knowing it's not just boom, I'm going to go win. It's a slow crawl instead of one big leap. I think the best way to put it is.
Yeah, when you really sit back and think about the jump from casual to competitive, it's when you casually play a game, you don't generally sit around and practice for hours. You play with your friends, play with maybe your significant other, your kids, but you're not sitting there practicing. You know how you get to Carnegie Hall, don't you? Practice, practice, practice. You got to treat it like a job at that point. If you're trying to go competitive and you're trying to go big, it's got to be a big portion of what you're doing. And that's like we're all echoing the same point here. It's you got to put in extra work, and you got to put in time and dedication, and you got to take it seriously. You got to go into it knowing that all these other people that are also vying for these top spots, they're doing the same thing you are, or more. You know, they could be working with a team. They could have a coach. They could pay someone to mentor them. There's so many levels of support that you can get for competitive play. Like, you don't know if it's just you and them, or you and their entire entourage. You know what I mean? So we're talking about putting in all this work to get these big wins at these events. But with big wins could also come big losses. Let me do that again. Something that comes along with big wins is big losses. And how to handle that is another big portion of what you need to think about if you're going competitive. I very recently played in a regional online webcam tournament for Digimon, and I scrubbed out in the 4th round. And I'm not going to lie, it shook me. And I didn't play Digimon for a couple weeks. I put my decks away, didn't even look at them. I was really bummed at how I had done in the tournament. But after some self-reflection, I realized that the only reason that I did so poorly was because I didn't practice. I didn't practice my deck as much as I should have. I didn't know it in and out like I should have. And that loss rests solely on me. And I bounced back from it, and I'm ready to go and start this new year with a fresh slate, and we're gonna kill it. I'm gonna put the time in. I'm gonna put the hours in. It's probably gonna be late nights sitting at my desk playing with people over webcam, but I'm ready. I'm not gonna let that happen again. So loss can take you in two directions, if you ask me. It can take you down a dark path, and some people can't come back from that, and some people put the cards down and never pick them back up again. I'm choosing to go down the other path, and I'm going to use that loss, and I'm going to make sure it never happens again. I don't want to feel that way again, and I know it's my sole responsibility to do the work and to practice. and to fix my mindset and to get them wins. You know what I mean?
For sure. And before I go down to my point, I want to say I didn't know we were becoming like a motivational podcast, but this is hitting home for me. It's pretty cool with all we've said. But
Good. Then hopefully it hits home for our listeners too, man. That's the goal, right?
exactly. So I guess I have a story too. This dates back I think 2018 or 29 Madison Pokemon Regionals. This was my first regionals ever. I was probably 8th grade, 9th grade. So I was young. I was a little baby.
More of a
But
baby.
I remember starting the day. Yeah, I am a baby still, but that's okay. In this realm, I am. But I started out the day 3-1, and I was playing this rogue deck that it wasn't meta at the moment, but I started the day 3-1, went at a lunch break, and I'm like, I can actually do something at my first regional ever. Come back for lunch break, lose out the rest of the day. You know, I'm young, and I didn't really know how to react. I think I remember I threw my cards at the wall when I got back to my hotel room, and my dad yelled at me for it. But I will say this about losing. There's going to be moments where you're like in the heat of the game and you're going to be sweating and you're just going to feel it. And like, you're just going to be like, you're going to be waiting for your opponent to be done with their turn. And you think you have it, but they're going to throw out a card and you're not going to get that final turn you need to win the game. And you're going to lose and you're going to have to sign the sheet and take an L and you're going to have to walk with it. It's going to hurt. But I think like Sean was saying is you have to be able to move on and realize and like learn from your mistakes. And yeah, you can take a break. You can take like a little break like Sean did and just recollect your thoughts and then go back into that competitive mindset. Because if you lose and then you like take that, you go right back into it, you may burn out. I know I've burnt out of Pokemon sometimes and I had to take a break for a few months. But being able to know like when to use that loss as a motivation is something that I think is really key, because if you can't handle loss, then it's going to be very tough for you to keep playing because you're just going to get mad at yourself over and over again. And sooner or later, you're just going to want to quit. And I think being able to continuously know when to slow down after a loss, like after, like, say, like you go to a tournament and like Sean said, you go and you play and you do poorly. And, you know, that's unfortunate. But then being able to sit back and say, okay, I did this wrong and I want to change that for the next one, I think that is the biggest one. Because I guarantee you, there will be tournaments where you fly across the country for it and you do very poorly. And it's going to suck. You spent all that money to fly out there, but, you know, you're going to have to live with it. You're going to have to move on and you're going to have to realize, okay, there's another regional an hour and a half away from me. In a few months, let's go get ready for that one. So I think that is the biggest thing with handling loss is not letting it get to you as much as you want it to. And it'll be hard. I guarantee you it won't be easy, but I think that is the biggest thing is to be able to focus on the positives of a loss, which I know still is a struggle for me to these days. When I play games, when I play sports, anything competitively, it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, what it really boils down to at the end of the day is just mental fortitude, right? Just being able to mentally take those losses, take those hits, set them aside, and keep pushing on and striving for whatever your game plan is. Because there's no, you know, we've talked a lot about like big losses, like post tournaments, like scrubbing out, but you're going to be facing constant losses throughout the entire process. Whether you lose a turn because someone wiped your board and then suddenly all your tempo you've been building is gone and now you have to start over again and figure out your new game plan. Best of threes, which, you know, is generally the American format. If you can go an entire top level tournament 2-0s 100% the way through, then I want your autograph 100%, because that is almost impossible. So in different matches, different matchups, you're gonna have a loss. You're gonna have to come back from whatever happened and re-implement your game plan in another match against that same opponent, and you have to learn from what happened in that previous game. And instead of letting it bring you down, you now have to take that as a learning opportunity and use that to push your game plan forward. So being able to bounce back and use these losses in order to propel yourself forward by preparing you for the future, like Teddy was talking about, is so key to having a consistently good showing and to be able to win over and over and over again. That's really what separates the top people that you see topping over and over and over again in all of these games versus others.
Yeah, one more thing that I just want to add, kind of tying back into the casual to competitive as well, is competitive players usually set goals. And one thing I know for sure for myself is I want to make sure that I set realistic goals. Like, I'm not jumping into Arcana and I am totally not expecting to be at the first worlds or anything like that. But I will shoot for it, being consistent at locals first, and then shooting for a regional or whatever comes along for Lorcana, and just working my way up to that. Because I've seen some people get into whatever hobby it is and they try to shoot for the stars right from the beginning, and when they don't reach that immediately, they just crash and burn and quit. So setting realistic goals, I think, will also be an important part in keeping your competitive mindset clear.
Yeah, 100%. And that really comes down to like knowing yourself, because there's going to be some people, like Levrom, where they need to set those smaller goals and incrementally improve and reach those goals and set higher and higher ones. And then there's going to be other people where if they don't have some crazy, ridiculous thing driving them forward, then they're not going to have the momentum that they need in order to reach it. And so knowing yourself and what motivates you and how you work is also really important for developing this competitive mindset.
So that was the first part of our episode, talking about a competitive mindset and what that may be and what it may take to put together and keep going in Lorcana or any trading card game for that matter. But now we're going to take a look at a winning game plan and what that may be. We have 4 steps for this that we're all going to take a look at and go over. And our first step is going to be from Sean. So Sean, what do you got?
So number 1, I feel, is you need to kind of determine what deck you're going to play. Like, you're going to look at whether you want to play meta or do you want to build a rogue deck? Do you want a net deck? These are all options. So you kind of got to determine that. And then through that scope, you're going to decide what you're going to be playing, your play style for the tournament. Like, are you going to be more of a control player? Are you going to be more of an aggro player? Are you going to be more of a mid-range player? And that's going to also help filter what decks you decide to play. Do you guys have any thoughts on the decks or play styles?
I think for play styles, you can always switch what play style you are. Like, one tournament you could be play control and one tournament you could play aggro. You have to understand how those play styles work, because you can't have, I think there are definitely aggro control decks in different games, but you have to understand that like some different play styles are very different from each other. If you want to play a deck that's going to be very consistent, then you have to realize that it might be a lot differently than how you play an aggro deck. And I think saying that, it also helps you when playing competitive, because if you're going to switch back and forth between control, aggro, consistency, it'll help you when you're playing against those type of decks. But I think one of the biggest things is you have to be able to understand how they all work before you play them. Because if you just go in and say, oh, I'm going to play this control deck, but I only know how to play aggro, it's not going to work, because you're going to try to play that control deck aggro and it's going to fizzle out and you're not going to know what you're doing. So I think the biggest thing is to understand how those play styles work. And when you go in to play a deck that has a certain play style, go in with that mindset as well. And I think that is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think like on that point, I got 2 things. One is understanding how all those different decks work. The best way to do that is to play them. And so, whether you're proxying or whatever, even if you have a preferred play style, like say you're a really heavy aggro player. Well, aggro play is really, really different from control. But play some control decks so you can get a feel for how they work, what their tempo is, what they're thinking when they're playing that, so that you can consider that when you're making your plays as well, so you know what to expect. And the thing is like once you've picked your, once you have your play style that you're deciding to, implement for whatever this particular tournament is and whatever your deck is, from there, you really need to figure out what your game plan is for that deck, which I know is what we're talking about. Like, how are you winning the game with this deck? What is your win con, and how can you make them happen? And that's like, if you don't understand what your deck's purpose is and how it wins, then you're not going to win. So making sure that you've got that in mind and you're constantly working towards whatever that win con is going to be key.
So yeah, once you have that deck and play style chosen, from there on, you just move on to our next step, which is just to practice. There are many different ways you can practice at home with friends. Ideally, for competitive, though, you want to try to have a team of friends that are like-minded competitive players like you, who are also trying to achieve the same goals as you, so that you know that they will be playing with those mindsets as well. Because unfortunately, there's not a lot you can gain from playing against casual players usually, because that's typically not the kind of play that you'll be seeing at your tournaments. And then another point during this step that I think may be important is during this practice phase, you may discover that you don't like the deck and play style that you've chosen, and that you actually prefer another one. So it's at this point, very early on, that you should determine if you are going to make a switch. It should be in this step, and not at the next step. That'll be coming up soon. But yeah, just making sure that you just get that time in and learn what decks you're going to be playing against, and what your deck can do is the most important thing that you can do with your practice. Is there anything that you guys wanted to add?
Take it seriously. It's not a joke. Practice.
Can we like cut on a recording or something?
I was channeling
that's
Shia
gonna be our new
LaBeouf in
catchphrase.
that moment.
Take it seriously. Practice. I know practicing it kind of like, I won't lie, it sounds boring at like the base center of it, but I know I'm going to relate this back to sports again, because that's all I do in my life, because it's literally, besides TCGs, all I pay attention to. But I know like during practice and stuff, it is where I learn the most. It's where I become better. And obviously you're going to become a lot better when you're playing at tournaments, because there's a little added pressure, and like you got like the energy and everything, like it feels a little different. But practicing and just sitting down, like doing webcam stuff, it'll make a whole lot of difference, because you get to understand your deck. If you don't understand your deck before going in a tournament, it's going to go poorly. I'm going to be honest, it's going to go really bad. But if you have the time to practice and just test out different decks, you don't have to buy the cards when you're testing, because you can just go print them off, put them, like take like any other game. I know like I have a crap ton of Pokemon cards, like just commons and uncommons. You take the piece of paper, you put it in front of the card, and there you go. You have a 60 card, however big the deck will be. You have your deck with just paper cards you to test things. That's all testing is. You don't have to have the cards to test, because I know like even before the game comes out, before we actually get our hands on real cards, as soon as we get a full set list and a full series of rules, I'm going to be making decks. I'm going to be coming up with things just like that. I think that is the biggest thing, is you have practicing is the easiest thing to do, because you can build as many decks as you want with just plain pieces of paper. If you do want to go and play in a tournament and actually like play in a sanctioned event, then yes, you do have to buy the cards. But being able to practice with just having paper is probably one of the most beneficial things ever. And I think that is definitely something to look forward to when Lorcana comes out, and take advantage of that, and being able to like know the cards like maybe 2-3 months, I'd say, before they come out, I think is something that's going to be so key, because as soon as that set releases, you can go straight into a tournament and know exactly what you want to play. And there probably will be a meta already. I won't lie. There will be by the time the game releases, just because people will be playing with paper cards before. And I think that comes back to practicing, and just being able to come back and practicing, and sitting down and saying, okay, let's do this. Let's go. Let's play. Let's figure out what decks work.
Right. Another good asset that I saw pop up in the Discord recently, didn't Surreal make basically a deck building site for Lorcana already? Yeah, man. I personally love digital deck building for a paper deck. I'll build it digitally, and then I'll fill it out in paper. And having a resource like that where you can actually have high quality images to pull for proxies, if you're that kind of guy like I am, you have a great resource in that too. So like you said, even a scrap of paper and a pen, like if you don't have a printer, because I know they're not cheap, but like anything like that is perfectly acceptable for practicing.
Yeah, I know like Limitless TCG is a big Pokemon brand, and they have like a whole proxy site where you just like look up the card, it gives it to you, you click how many you want, and then it sends it off to a piece of paper and it prints it right away. And I feel like we definitely will see something like that. But I know like down the line, those proxies, those are going to be the greatest thing ever, I believe, before even the game comes out.
Yeah. And then harkening back to, something Teddy was talking about earlier is, practice makes permanent. And so when we're out here, practicing, it's important that we consider how we're practicing, that we are intentional and mindful of what it is that we're doing in the game, and looking out for any misplays, any missed opportunities, as well as how we can overcome whatever it is that our opponents are doing as well. So there's a big difference between playing games and practicing, because there's a attention and mindfulness level that needs to be in place in order for it to be considered practice, in my opinion. And from there, that brings us to our third point of, once you've got your practice down, go out and play in the real world in tournaments, because you're not really going to be able to determine exactly what level you're at until you get into that realm and are playing against other people that are doing the same thing that you're doing, and across different metas, across different stuff, because you might be the king of the hill at your locals or in your play group, but then no plan survives first contact, right? So you might walk into a regionals and your first one, and you think you're going to be hot stuff, and you just get punched in the jaw and realize that, okay, so maybe you do need to do a little bit more practice, or maybe you weren't expecting to do as well as you did. You had set lower expectations for yourself, and you go out there and you crush it. Like, there's no telling exactly where you're going to stack up until you're there. So that's what it really comes down to, is go out and play in these real world tournaments, see how you do, so then you can go back to these first couple of steps and adjust.
Yeah, like you said, there's no substitute for the real thing. There's no substitute for sitting across from somebody you don't know, potentially. Like, you might be in a tournament with your friends, and you might draw each other's lots or whatever, and you might play, but generally it's going to be a complete stranger. And that's a whole nother leap to get over when you hit the real world, is you don't know their mannerisms, you don't know their anything. That's a whole nother wild card that you have to prepare for as well when you hit and that the only thing that you can do to prepare for that is by doing it.
Yeah, and that brings up something I actually forgot to mention, is that practicing is one thing, but once you're actually there and there's real stakes on what you're doing, it's a whole different situation. You know, like going into Teddy and all of his sports stuff. Like, you go into a scrimmage and it's like, whatever. You go out, you have fun, you play. But then when you go and you face that same team and, you know, it's your homecoming game, and if you let the whole school down by losing, then it's a whole different game.
Yeah. I can like attest to the fact that like I play Ultimate Frisbee now at my college, and we'll play like the B team versus the A team just to test and give like the B team more opportunities, like to see better play and learn from it. We do get crushed. I won't lie. It's night and day the difference between the both teams. But there's a different feeling like when we go to a tournament and we somehow get matched up against each other. There's a different feeling there of playing even the people you are closest to and like you know the best and you know their play styles. There's a whole different feeling playing them casually versus like at an actual tournament. I think that is something that like people don't really expect in a game, but when you go in and you have to face like people you know, there's a different feeling there. And strangers too. I feel like it's easy for me personally. I feel like it's easier to sit down next to across from a stranger than it is somebody I know. Because like we could have inside jokes and we could like I could want to say something, but then I know how you play, and if you're gonna get mad at me if I say something stupid while I'm playing. While we're playing, then I'm not. It's gonna be a whole different thing. When you're playing with strangers, you kind of don't have to worry about that. But for me personally, playing against somebody who's I'm close with and I know better is actually a bit harder in my mind.
Because also, if you mess up and you scrub out, then, you know, they're going to mess with you about it for forever.
Oh, yes, for sure.
Hey, remember the times we got paired up at the Orlando Regionals and you forgot to play your ink card and then that threw you off for the entire game?
Yeah, help me win the tournament. Screw you.
Yeah, you remember that sweet misplay? Yeah,
thanks
that was great, guys.
Thanks for boosting my strength and schedule there, Teddy.
So for number 4 in our little winning game plan strategy, kind of what like Spencer said at the last part of his was like rinse and repeat. Redo this steps over and over again. Because if you just like determine what deck you want to play, practice, 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 and you go to regional and you play well and you do well, but then you don't go back home and you're like, oh, I just played well, I don't need to practice anymore, and you go to the next regional, you probably will get crushed. I will not lie to you. Unless like you like play online and stuff like that, but you need to go back home and you need to practice again. You need to, because there might be new cards that come out between that tournament and the next one. There may be new combos that become discovered and become good. The meta is always changing in a TCG, and I think that is the biggest thing to understand. Is yes, there will be decks that will be good for a long time, but there will also be new archetypes that come up that you may want to build and you may want to play with, and you may have to learn how to play against those just because they are that good. And once you realize that they are that good, probably you might want to test them out. You want to see how they play. You want to see how they are piloted, because that helps you then beat them with the deck you want to play at an actual tournament. But be able to understand about going to a tournament, playing your heart out, playing well or playing bad, depending that don't know what will happen, but then going back and redoing that cycle over and over again is something that is key, because if you don't, then you're gonna slowly see a decline in how you perform. At least that's what something happened to me when I was younger, because I didn't really understand the full thing when I was 16, 17. Now that I am older and like I've actually been able to like look back and everything, I understand that you have to practice and get better and keep doing those. Okay, we don't need to talk about that.
It's such a self-help for it, man. Like, we can't not.
I guess it was last year, but okay, maybe like 14, 15.
I'm
Maybe
sorry,
when I was
I'm
14
trying.
or 15.
You're all thinking
I'm
it.
trying
All of
so
you
hard not to laugh.
I'm sorry.
When I'm 17, that feels like a long time ago.
Sorry.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I will say that is actually one thing that my wife said when she was listening, because you said something in a similar vein in an earlier episode, and she was like, "Oh, sweet child." Sweet child.
I try. But I think for me personally, there has been a lot of change between me being in college and being this experience, but then also playing like the difference between me at the start of 2021 or 2022 and the start of 23 is a big difference. Like I am totally different things. So I think when I come and say like 16, 17, it definitely maybe more like 14, 15, but just being able to look back on my previous TCG experiences and understand what went wrong there, and now transitioning and putting those bigger efforts into Lorcana is definitely something I will be trying to do better of, and hopefully be able to use that to become more of a competitive player.
For sure, man.
So yes, rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat.
Yeah, man. You don't sit back and think the people that are topping the big tournaments, you think they're going home and sitting back and not practicing and not playing. Your kid, they're doing it more than anybody else. That's why they're at the top. So you can take a break. Like if you want to go competitive, take a break. Don't burn out, but at the same time, take it seriously. You got to put a lot of work into this. Like you're going to be playing, like not just playing, but practicing like 4 or 5 days a week, probably, if you're really going for it.
Yeah, I think what it really comes down to is just, some people are going to appreciate this iterative development, right? Not only is the game constantly changing, but you need to be constantly developing with it at the same time. So if you go out and you do really well and you surpass your goals, well, then you know that whatever you're doing is working. So you need to keep doing that. That's not a time to hang back. It's a time to buckle down and keep doing what you were doing before. If you didn't hit your goals, well, then you know that something needs to change. And so you need to figure out what it is. And that's when we go back to steps 1 and 2 in order to figure out what it is that we need to change in order to actually hit our goals next time. So it's this constant state of development and catching up with the game as well as yourself throughout the entire time.
That was episode 5. We all hope you guys enjoyed the competitive mindset and winning game plan we had for you guys. If you guys do have any thoughts on the episode, make sure to drop them below, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks for listening, you guys. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did making it. If you have any other questions about competitive mindset or anything else we talked about, let us know. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks, and Glimmer on.